Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Council, please be upstanding for the worship for the Mayor of Gedling.
Good evening. Please remain standing while we have a minute's silence in solidarity of the people of Ukraine. Thank you. Please be seated. In the absence of my chaplain, who I believe is ill, Councillor Barnes-Sandra has asked me to read this out, which I'm quite happy to do so. Listen in deep silence. Be very still. Open your mind. Sink deep into peace that waits for you beyond the frantic, riotous thoughts and sounds and sights of this insane world. Let's move to the agenda. Apologies for absence. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies from the leader, Councillor Clark, who I'm afraid is ill and just not able to attend tonight. He's very sorry that he's unable to, and I believe Councillor Payne may have something to say about that, but apologies if not. And Councillor Hemingway has also given her apologies.
Thank you. I'm sure we all send our best wishes to Councillor Clark for a speedy recovery. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All present and correct on our side.
Councillor Towsey-Hinton.
We're all present and correct.
Right, thank you. I've forgotten her name. Bosworth. Councillor Bosworth, sorry.
Yes, all present.
Item number 3 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest on any item on the agenda? If not, thank you. There are urgent items which I've agreed can be taken at this meeting. The first is on Ukraine. Before we move onto the budget item, this was brought to me by Councillor Payne with the support of all the political parties and relates to the Council's response to the developing situation in the Ukraine. I consider that there are special circumstances adding this urgent item to tonight's agenda. In particular, the horrific situation in Ukraine has escalated significantly, resulting in considerable loss of life since the publication of our formal agenda for full council on 23rd of February The item also affects Ukrainian nationals living here in Gedling Borough who are looking to the Council for support and solidarity. I consider that the Council's position on this rapidly changing crisis should be considered urgently to give reassurance and support to those impacted both inside and outside the borough. A resolution setting out the Council's position has been prepared in agreement with all parties and circulated to councils. Remind you that if you wish to speak, please remain seated or go to the rostrum. Otherwise, the cameras won't pick you up properly, as this meeting is being recorded. Councillor Payne, would you like to propose the motion?
Mr. Mayor, may I start by thanking you graciously for allowing us to discuss the urgent situation in Ukraine this evening. Thank you also to the Chief Executive, to the Monitoring Officer and to fellow officers of the Council for assisting in allowing this urgent item to be discussed this evening, which seems wholly appropriate. Thank you also for the leadership and unity shown by Leader of the Council, Councillor John Clark, who sadly can't be with us tonight, and I wish you well, John. I know he has deep ties with European countries, particularly Poland, but also Ukraine, and is deeply saddened not to be here tonight to show his solidarity. And can I also express my sincere thanks to the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Michael Adams, to the Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Councillor Andrew Elwood, and to the Leader of the Independents, Councillor Pat Bosworth, for the time they took yesterday to speak to me about this issue, and for the leadership and unity that they have shown on this issue in bringing it to the agenda tonight. Mr. Mayor, we are blessed to be able to debate our differences, but tonight we come together to defend our common values. We meet tonight at a dark hour for Ukraine and a dark moment for the world. We meet to discuss the future of our borough and to democratically debate the way forward in the year ahead. Right now, our fellow humans in Ukraine are being denied that most basic of human rights as a result of an illegal invasion of their sovereign nation. Tonight, invading troops march through Ukraine's streets. Missiles shell their homes. Countless lives have been lost. They've been cast into a horrific war, not through fault of their own, but because Vladimir Putin fears their freedom. Mr. Mayor, tonight, we at Gedling Borough Council will come together to stand with Ukraine. We will send a united message to Ukrainian nationals here in Gedling Borough that we are here for them. Tonight, we will defend the values we cherish and that sent us to this chamber. The same values Ukrainians are fighting so bravely to defend. Democracy, liberty, freedom. Let us be crystal clear. We strongly condemn the multiple attacks and illegal violations of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. We express our full support and solidarity to the Ukrainian people and our peers in local and regional government in Ukraine. We consider the escalation of violence, repeated bombings and attacks on Ukrainian cities and territories as a serious threat to the preservation of peace and democracy across Europe. And we call on the Russian Federation to cease its illegal attack, to leave the national territory of Ukraine, to respect all international treaties and fundamental principles of international law, and to recognise full sovereignty of Ukraine over all of its territories, including Donbass and Crimea. So, to our Ukrainian nationals here in Gedling Borough, please know that you are always welcome here. You will always be respected here, and you will always be valued here. This council stands ready to support you and extends our hand of friendship and compassion to you. The council also proudly stands to welcome Ukrainian people fleeing war and persecution in their own country. We will, as I told Councillor Michael Adams yesterday, assist with any government proposals for resettlement support for Ukrainians seeking sanctuary here in the United Kingdom. Mr. Mayor, let me finish by saying this. We know how dictatorships work. It seeks division. So we know how to defeat it. As Putin seeks division, we must stand united. The hour may seem dark, but light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Councillor Hollingsworth, would you like to second?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And just to endorse what's been said by Councillor Payne, I think we've all been very well aware of the reaction of our local residents to this unfolding horror, because it's been broadcast into our homes, onto our iPads. And we're also conscious of residents in the Gedling Borough who have family, friends, relatives, people that they've known from their childhoods, still in Ukraine or have fled to other countries. We all share the horror. I listened to the head of DEC, the Disasters Emergency Committee, only today, who expressed his shock and horror that in 2021 we see this unfolding in Europe, something he said he never thought he would see. But it's here. We stand in solidarity with Ukraine. We commit ourselves to assisting any refugee that comes into Gedling Borough, as we have also always welcomed refugees and those fleeing war and violence. So I can't say I have pleasure in seconding this motion, Mr Mayor, because it should not be necessary to bring this to Council, but I do second. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Adams.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It was the 24th of February, and for no other reason than my brain can explain that I woke up at 1:30 in the morning. And as you do, you attempt to get back off to sleep. But for whatever reason, I couldn't. And I picked up my phone, as you also do, and we should never do, and ended up on Twitter. And it was at that point that the shelling had begun. I went to sleep that night, eventually, after watching many updates, many awful pictures as they begin to feed through, hoping that maybe I would wake up in the morning and realise that it wasn't happening as it was. But that was not to be the case. And the image that I saw, which will stick with me, I suspect probably for the rest of my life, was a load of children with colouring books going underground. Not underground to pop out the other side and wave, but going underground to save their lives. Going underground, hoping the thunder would stop. But as we know, it hasn't, and it continues to rattle around the streets, and it expands and it grows. And that morning, I took the decision to discuss it with my children, because I figured they're going to go to school that day and there's going to be discussions about it, and maybe they'll get the wrong story. Maybe they will get a story that's maybe dramatised. And I told them what happened, and I explained to them. My son said to me, as he covered his head over with a blanket, "I hope that this doesn't come to our house, Daddy." And I assured him, and I hoped it wouldn't. But I tell you one thing, ladies and gentlemen, if this ever does come to our door, I will stand up to it. As those brave people in Ukraine are standing up to it. They make me proud every time I hear about a moment of saying, no, this isn't right, this is where we live. You shouldn't be here trying to take away our way of life. That strength, not willing to give up, is something we've experienced in our history, but none of us have experienced in our present. And like the people who went through those awful things in our own country many, many years ago, I hope it comes to an end, a safer end, and I hope the bloodshed stops. And I hope this motion today says something of the people we are and the way we feel, and that we should resist this with everything we've got. Thank you for listening to me. And
Thank you, Councillor Adams.
thank you.
Councillor Elwood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Payne and Councillor Adams and Councillor Hollingsworth have already said. Our hearts and prayers go out to the Ukrainian people. The generosity of the neighbouring countries in supporting Ukrainian refugees in Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania and Moldova, that shows Europe at its best. This totally unnecessary war is at the hands of Vladimir Putin, not the Russian people. A leader who is delusional and who has blood on his hands. I urge all members to support the resolution tonight. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Elwood. Councillor Bosworth.
Everything that has been said, and we wholeheartedly support this resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Bosworth. Is there anyone else who wants to speak on this? If not, we'll move to the vote. In accordance with the standing order adopted under the Local Authorities Standing Orders England Amendment Regulations of 2014, all votes at budget setting meetings must be taken as recorded votes. Mr Hill.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. For this vote, when I call your name, please state either for, against or abstain. Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Peter Barnes. For. Councillor Sandra Barnes.
Definitely for.
Councillor Barnfather.
For.
Councillor Bosworth.
For.
Councillor Boyle.
For.
Councillor Brooks.
For.
Councillor Clooney.
For.
Councillor Collis.
For.
Councillor Creamer.
For.
Councillor Duncan. Councillor Elliott.
For.
Councillor David Ellis.
For.
Councillor Rachel Ellis.
For.
Councillor Roxanne Ellis.
For.
Councillor Elwood. Councillor Feeney. Councillor Fox. Councillor Gibbons.
For.
Councillor Greensmith.
For.
Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Hope. Councillor Keneally. Mr Mayor, Councillor Lawrence.
For.
Councillor Ron McCrossan. Councillor Viv McCrossan. Councillor Miller. Councillor Murray.
For.
Councillor Nyuk. Councillor Paling.
For.
Councillor Parr.
For.
Councillor Payne.
For.
Councillor Scroggy. Councillor Martin Smith.
For.
Councillor Sam Smith.
For.
Councillor Towsey Hinton. Councillor Truscott. Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Wilkinson.
For.
Carried, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. That's carried unanimously. And I should say that just because nobody else spoke doesn't mean that we don't feel the same emotions as those who did speak. And we can only hope that reason will prevail. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is another urgent one. Before I do, I was remiss in not welcoming two people to this first full council meeting. The first is Eugene Minogue, who is sitting at the end there, our new Assistant Director, and of course Emma McGinley, our Head of Democratic Services. Welcome. And also, of course, welcome to the usual people who are sitting here. The second item of urgent business was brought to me by the Director of Corporate Resources and Section 151 officer and relates to approval of an amended council tax reduction scheme for 2022 to 23. A report in relation to this item has been circulated to all councillors. I consider that there are special circumstances which require this item to be considered as a matter of urgency. The special reasons that I find are set out in paragraph 5.3 of the report, namely, government guidance in relation to the energy bills rebate was published on the 23rd of February 2022, the same day as the agenda of this meeting. There was insufficient time for this issue to be included in the published agenda at that time. Secondly, the authority are required by statute to include a disregard of payments made under the energy bills rebate scheme as part of the council tax reduction scheme for 2022-23. Thirdly, the council tax reduction scheme for 2022-23 must be approved by full council and must be approved by the 11th of March 2022. Tonight's meeting provides the forum to comply with those requirements. And finally, officers have been following the statutory requirements to consult on the proposed amendment to the council tax reduction scheme to include the energy bills rebate disregard, which has been undertaken proportionately and swiftly to enable this matter to be considered swiftly. Councillor Payne to propose.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for setting out comprehensively the reason for this report being here, but also the background to the report. I think the report that's been circulated by the 151 officer speaks for itself, and let me just say thank you to Alison Ball and to also the wider team who are working hard to make sure that we can get the necessary payments to relevant people in terms of the council tax rebate that's been announced by the Chancellor in the time that the government would be expecting. This is one part of the regulations that have been set out, and as you quite rightly said, Mr. Mayor, allows for the disregard of that council tax rebate energy bill support in terms of the calculation for our council tax reduction scheme. The recommendation is on the front of the sheet, which is that the council tax reduction scheme CTRS 2022-23 be amended to include the statutory requirement to disregard the support for energy bills related council tax rebate from the calculation of CTRS entitlement as detailed in paragraph 2.1 of the report. I move the report and also associate myself with the comment you made, Mr. Mayor, in welcoming our new Corporate Director, Eugene Minogue. You're very welcome to family Gedling Borough. Eugene, you're going to do a great job for us, and also to Emma, who's been of great assistance in supporting us alongside our monitoring officer in getting these urgent items here today. So thank you for the great work you're already doing, Emma, and I'm sure you're going to do a fantastic job for us going forward. I move the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Councillor Hollingsworth to second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Seconded and reserve the right to speak.
Are there any other speakers on this? Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to, again, welcome Emma and Eugene as well. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for your help so far with preparation, as has been mentioned, with this report, and also the work towards this meeting. And also, yeah, it's great to see the support has come forward to help people during these difficult times. And I'm glad that you've been able to facilitate it into a report so we can get it to people as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Anybody else? If not, did you want to say anything, Councillor Hollingsworth?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Did you want to close, Councillor Payne?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, urgent item. This has to be done by a recorded vote, so Councillor Hill. Mr Hill, sorry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Right, we shall move on swiftly on that one. So once again, for this vote, when I call your name, please state either for, against or abstain. Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Peter Barnes. For. Councillor Sandra Barnes. For. Councillor Barnfather.
For.
Councillor Bosworth. For. Councillor Boyle.
For.
Councillor Brooks.
For.
Councillor Clooney.
For.
Councillor Collis.
For.
Councillor Creamer.
For.
Councillor Duncan. Councillor Elliott.
For.
Councillor David Ellis. Councillor Rachel Ellis.
For.
Councillor Roxanne Ellis.
For.
Councillor Elwood. Councillor Feeney. Councillor Fox. Councillor Gibbons.
For.
Councillor Greensmith.
For.
Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Hope. Councillor Keneally. Okay. Mr Mayor, Councillor Lawrence.
For.
Councillor Ron McCrossan. Councillor Viv McCrossan. Councillor Miller. Councillor Murray. Councillor Nayuk. Councillor Paling. Councillor Parr.
For.
Councillor Payne.
For.
Councillor Scroggy. Councillor Martin Smith.
For.
Councillor Sam Smith.
For.
Councillor Towsey Hinton. Councillor Truscott. Councillor Wheeler. And Councillor Wilkinson.
For.
Carried, Mr Mayor.
That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 4, which is the budget. Items 4A to E to be taken as one. The recommendations for approval were circulated via email on the 1st of March 2022. Councillor Payne to move, please.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. And may I just begin by repeating something I said earlier, get well soon, to Councillor John Clark, the Leader of the Council. This is clearly an important meeting in our calendar year on year, and I think it goes without saying, anybody who knows John, he's worked really hard on this budget, really hard on this Gedling plan, and I certainly am proud to serve in his cabinet, and I feel a bit of a fraud, really, sat here tonight, taking credit for his work, really, his leadership. So get well soon, John, and I hope I do some of what you've set out credit. Let me just also say that we've obviously had consensus and agreement tonight on an important issue, and it is clearly very healthy for us to debate differences here in the chamber, but I will do my level best to show some good temper in the discussion we're going to have about the budget tonight. I understand there will be differences across party, but I think it's incumbent on all of us tonight to get the business done in terms of the budget, allow the council continue to do, I think, broadly the good work that it is doing. Of course, I'm proud of what we've done as an administration, but I'm also, may I say, quite proud of the work that councillors do day in, day out across party in their own wards. And whilst clearly we will have our own ambitions set out, I'm big enough to say that some of the work that Gedling Borough Council does is not only reliant on our fantastic staff, but also the ideas, the scrutiny, the challenge, the accountability that is contributed by councillors across the chamber. So I just start by saying that this evening, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, the last 2 years have been something the likes of which many of us have never experienced before. Coronavirus has changed all of us. The pressure on families has been immense. The impact on our local businesses, and you will have seen this, all of you in your own wards, has been profound, and the loss of life has been heartbreaking. I want to begin, Mr Mayor, tonight by sending my deepest sympathies, and I'm sure the sympathies and condolences of the entire Council, to the 414 families who have now lost a loved one to COVID here in our borough. You are all in our hearts, thoughts and prayers. As the coronavirus restrictions are lifted and life starts getting back to normal, we now face another crisis, the cost of living. We are entering a period of high inflation, which is outstripping wages, benefits and state pension increases, and together these are squeezing incomes for many households, not just in my ward, not just in wards represented by colleagues in the administration, but in all of our wards. We have increasing food prices, elevated petrol prices and rising mortgage prices. In April, Mr Mayor, we will see an increase in national insurance contributions, a freeze in income tax personal allowances and a rise in the energy price cap. The highly respected Institute for Fiscal Studies has calculated that wages need to increase by 9% in April to prevent real post-tax wages from falling. A sad reflection of the current state of affairs, I think, Mr Mayor. Living standards are falling, whilst fossil fuel companies' profits soar. And yet, Mr Mayor, tragically, and I know there will be disagreement about this in the chamber tonight, from where I sit, it seems at times like the government seems impotent to some of these problems. But I do want to say this, Mr Mayor, to every one of our residents and families who are financially vulnerable here in Gedling Borough. I want you to know you are not alone. And I think I speak for all councillors when I say Gedling Borough Council, our hard-working staff, and indeed your elected representatives, whatever their party colour, are here if you need our help. I will return to this a little more later on. Mr Mayor, in terms of the business in hand, tonight, of course, I'm proud on behalf of the Leader of the Council to be introducing the refreshed Gedling Plan for 2020-23. We are now entering the third and final year of the plan, which brings to life our vision and ambitions for the future. And it would be churlish, Mr Mayor, for me to claim that that plan is solely the vision and ambitions of our administration. Of course, it also includes ideas that have been championed by councillors cross-party. Our values, Mr Mayor, set out what we stand for and the way we do business, and the Gedling Plan highlights our key priorities and actions, all of which support our ethos and driving mission, which I think is supported cross-party, serving people, improving lives. It's what we do day in, day out. Even in the face, Mr Mayor, of a global pandemic, with all the challenges we face locally, by working with our local communities and our partners, we are still delivering on the vision in the Gedling Plan. The plan sets out an ambitious programme of activities to improve the quality of life for all of our residents, and we are confident as a council that we can continue to make the borough a place we are all proud of, where people choose to live, do business and spend their time, and where there are opportunities for all. Our ambition, Mr Mayor, is nothing short of creating a borough that is the best place to grow up in and the best place to grow old in. And again, I hope I speak cross-party when I say I'm sure that is something that everybody could get behind. Mr Mayor, let me now turn my attention to the budget. I want to start with some of the details about budget funding. This year's budget continues to be set against a backdrop of continued unprecedented cuts from government to our grant funding and declining income levels as well. Not only that, but we have rising inflation, as I've drawn attention to, and crucially, and this is being felt by central government, by the county council, by the police service, by the fire service, by other services, rising demand, placing Gedling and many other public services under incredible pressure. Let me set it out in a little more detail. The government announced the comprehensive spending review in October 2021, promising financial certainty for the coming 3 years, something for which at the time I praised, and indeed other people praised. Disappointingly, though, the final settlement figures, and this was referenced in our county council debate last week, the final figures announced by the government on the 7th of February provided actual figures for 2022-23 only. Slightly let down by year-to-year settlements. I think anybody expecting to run a large business or even a household on year-to-year budgets would find it incredibly difficult, and I'm sure there is agreement about that across the chamber. Looking at the government's own figures, Mr Mayor, of cumulative core spending power, Gedling now stands at a decrease in funding from 2015-16 of 12.4%. And they aren't my figures, they're official Treasury figures. This makes us the 7th worst affected council in England, an increase from the previous 2 years, for which I will give credit to the government. But in those 2 previous financial years, we were the worst affected council in England. And before anybody says how great it is that we are now 7th instead of worst affected in England, let me just explain that that increase is primarily down to the pace of build-out by housing developers and not necessarily any generosity from central government. It relates primarily to New Homes Bonus. The figures, Mr Mayor, reflect a real terms cash reduction in central government funding during the 7-year period of 1.9 million, or 38%. And over the last 12 years, since 2010-2011, when this administration took charge, the equivalent figure is a staggering £5.8 million. Let me express that in another way. It's a 65% reduction. And I don't sit here and take any credit, and the leader wouldn't sit here and take any credit for, I think, the excellent financial management of this council. But let me just pause at this moment and say we are very, very blessed to have Alison Ball and her team supporting all of us as councillors in the decisions we make about the council's finances. I think officers contending with a 65% reduction in our budget have done an absolutely outstanding job, notwithstanding the disagreements and debates there might be in the chamber tonight. So thank you, Alison, and I certainly have seen first-hand this time round in terms of the budget round, the stress and strain that it's put on you. And I think I've said in this chamber before, Alison, you and your team often put the council before your own personal circumstances and your own personal family. And I certainly speak for the entire council when I say that we are all eternally grateful for your public service and for the wisdom that you bring to the decisions that we make. So, 1 year on from the leader's last budget speech, and what has changed at a national level? Not a lot. Once again, there are uncertainties around future funding. There is still the uncertainty around changes to business rate system, and I know that isn't just a frustration for me on this side of the chamber, it is for others. And of course, we're now in the 4th year of waiting for the fair funding review, and good speed to Michael Gove, the new Secretary of State, for, I think, now trying to, and I've heard him speak about this, get to grips with this issue, and I wish him well in doing so, because it is so desperately needed here in Gedling, and we will work with the Secretary of State to offer whatever information we can as he tussles with that thorny issue. Central government cuts have forced us to try and maintain crucial services for our residents and businesses at the same time as taking 65p, Mr Mayor, in every pound out of our hands. Therefore, regrettably, we are left, and it's in the budget papers tonight, with no choice but to raise council tax levels by the amount that is expected of us from the Chancellor and the Treasury of £5 for a bandy property. Of course, it isn't quite £5 for the vast majority of households in Gedling, because the vast majority of households in Gedling fall within a band A and B, which equates to less than 7 pence per week for the average Gedling household. I'm sure we would all agree that local authorities have been disproportionately hit by cuts, but such is the magnitude of funding reductions that maintaining business as usual has been a mammoth task to achieve. And yet we collectively as a council, not just our administration, have achieved it. Allow me to turn my attention to Gedling's response to the cuts in funding. As I stand here today, yes, like other councils, we have been forced to make a significant number of budget reductions. But unlike other councils, we have not stopped providing any services, and the quality and performance of those services has remained at high levels. And I think I speak for all councillors when I say that, and we're very grateful to our staff. We absolutely couldn't have done any of this without our excellent staff. There are not as many as there used to be, but they continue to serve us cross-party as a group of councillors and the people of Gedling and businesses we serve extremely well. And I think I speak for all of us when I say we are very proud, Mike, of you and the entire team of the council and your commitment to this council at what have particularly been tough times. So let me just now bring us up to date, Mr Mayor. Full councillors approved 5 separate efficiency programmes totalling £6.5 million. That's a collective effort by us in this chamber. Progress has been positive, with £5.3 million already being delivered, with the majority of the remaining £1.2 million being achieved in this current financial year. Members will remember that last year, another £0.6 million was set as a further efficiency target for this year when we met last time in council. And as it gets even more difficult year on year, this has been an incredibly difficult task to identify, but savings amounting to £545,000 are set out in the report before us tonight. Furthermore, future uncertainties around the delayed government reviews have deemed it prudent, and this is in the report tonight, to set out an additional efficiency target of £1 million in the medium-term financial plan to be identified over the coming year. And that won't just be a job of the administration, it will be a job of all of us as councillors, challenging, asking questions and scrutinising. And yet, despite all these reductions in central government funding, this administration has once again proven its worth and delivered a medium-term financial plan, as we are expected to by law, that has a balanced budget in this year, but also a balanced budget for the next 5 years, up to 26-27. Mr Mayor, we as a council, and I think this is as a council, not just the Labour administration, has been prudent with our residents' pennies and looked after the taxpayers' pounds. We are all ambitious for our community's future, but we only spend what we can afford. So let me just turn to the period we have been in control at the council. Since 2011, we have protected proudly working-age households by agreeing a 100% funded council tax reduction scheme, and I'm very grateful for the cross-support that has had in recent years, and I'm proud to say that this will continue for the ensuing year. An estimated 4,600 plus families will be protected by us collectively as councillors from increased council tax pressures. For those working age families not entitled to 100% support, we will provide an additional council tax discretionary reduction of up to £30. This will not only offset the impact of Gedling's proposed council tax increase that I referenced earlier for our most vulnerable families, but also go some way to mitigate the impact of council tax rises imposed by other precepting authorities, such as the police force, the fire service, the county council and parish councils in our area. Just in case anybody didn't catch what I said, Mr Mayor, because I think this is important, we talked about the government support earlier, which is incredibly welcome in terms of energy prices. Gedling Borough Council, as a result of the approval of this budget this year, which I hope will get unanimous support, will provide an additional council tax discretionary reduction over and above our existing scheme of up to £30 for vulnerable working age families, which will negate the council tax increase we are asking for and put money back in the pockets of hard-working families across our borough. If that isn't a reason to get behind this budget, I don't know what is. And that is what a caring and compassionate council will do in support of our residents. We've led the way as a council locally, Mr Mayor, and in some instances regionally and nationally on a wide range of community initiatives. This includes the creation of the Humanitarian Centre at the Richard Herod site and the Giving for Gedling crowdfunding campaign that was supported cross-party that gained national acclaim. But we don't need to look backward, as our record speaks for itself as a council. We have delivered on every local promise as an administration we have ever made to residents, and we always will. 3 years ago, we swept to victory in the council, and it was based on a new set of manifesto pledges to our residents and businesses. And there were promises made and there were promises kept. We have, Mr Mayor, worked with the Police and Crime Commissioner, who is doing a good job in office, and we will continue to work with her to create a new neighbourhood policing team. And our thanks to the previous Police and Crime Commissioner who had worked with us on that initiative as well. The transition from one to another Police and Crime Commissioner has shown that politics doesn't have to get in the way of important issues. This has provided funding for a number of crime reduction initiatives within the borough, including new CCTV cameras, for which Councillor Ellis and the Public Protection team should be thanked and celebrated. And we won't stop there. This council will continue to invest in CCTV as outlined in tonight's budget to help keep our streets safe. And I hope when members see tonight the investment in CCTV, they will recognise that that investment is not just in the areas where it might have previously been expected, it's in areas that are cross-party represented in terms of their councillors. We have also completed a new entrance and resurfacing of the car park at Carlton Square, for which Councillor Hollingsworth should be congratulated, and very soon we will see the completion of our new iconic building and modern public realm in the Arnold Marketplace. Much needed investment in the local town centre, and my sincere thanks to the team who have overseen that project. We've retained 2 hours free parking. We've won free bulky waste collection, which we've extended out to pensioners during the winter amnesty. We're also investing in health and wellbeing of our residents by introducing new new Gedling Forces leisure card, and a new swimming passport providing access to free swimming sessions for under 16s and over 65s, for which Councillor Henry Wheeler has championed vociferously in his role as Cabinet Member. And we will continue as a council to invest in our leisure centres to maintain our customer base at the leisure centres and Bonington Theatre and Cinema. We've made further investment in our play areas, with Breck Hill, Oncham Park and Killissick play areas all opening in the last year. And the councillors in those respective areas have done a fantastic job with the friends of those parks to bring about that investment, and they should be congratulated. And then we've our successful flagship Gedling Country Park that we are all cross-party incredibly proud of. A new car park, a brand new cafe seating area and 2 new viewing platforms, partly funded, may I hasten to add, by the European Union, all delivered as a result of investment by this council. In terms of housing, everyone knows that getting new homes off the ground is a huge challenge. But Gedling has led the way in Nottinghamshire with its local plan, gaining approval in the summer of 2018, supported unanimously cross-party here by all councillors in the chamber, and we are now working collaboratively with the Greater Nottinghamshire Planning Partnership. We're looking at future options for growth. Councillor Hollingsworth is doing some fantastic work in this area, and Councillor Truscott and the Planning Committee cross-party continue to oversee issues in relation to planning, I think, very ably. And my thanks go to Mike Avery and his wider team for the work that they're doing in this important area. And despite COVID, Mr Mayor, the delivery of new housing on key sites has progressed at pace across the borough. Keepmoat have now delivered 330 new homes at Chase Farm, with a further 113 under construction. At Teal Close, which I was talking to Councillor Adams and Smith about earlier, Persimmon Homes have now built 218 houses, and at Rolleston Drive, Jigsaw Homes have commenced the development of 131 affordable houses using modern methods of construction, which will facilitate a swift delivery of the much-needed affordable homes in our area. A number of other key housing sites are now delivering in my own ward in Red Hill, in Calverton, in Gedling and in Mapley, with significant numbers of completions expected this year. This year we will continue delivering for our residents. These are very difficult times ahead, but this council will always rise to the challenge. We want Gedling to be known as a council that recognises the need to change, but also to be compassionate in the way we operate our services. Again, I'm sure that's something that we could get behind cross-party. So, Mr Mayor, we know the price of things, but we equally recognise the value of things to our community, a point that the leader impresses upon all of us very regularly. This is very important to this administration and to this council, and you can see this through the variety of projects that we are working on now and in the future. So during the coming year, Mr Mayor, we will continue with our Green Lung initiative for Gedling. Our residents will be able to enjoy a beautiful extension to Gedling Country Park as we create a walking route between the park and Digby Park. In the face of the coronavirus pandemic, we have all learned to love our beautiful outdoors a little more. This administration will protect our parks and green spaces and invest in them to create beautiful outdoor spaces for all to enjoy. And indeed, we're working, I think, very successfully with Nottinghamshire County Council cross-party on some fantastic tree planting initiatives and other ideas to improve our parks. I am incredibly proud, Mr Mayor, to announce, particularly in light of the deeply awful situation that reminds us of the dark days of the horrific Second World War and Holocaust that took place a number of decades ago, that we will be citing, as a result of this budget, a Holocaust Memorial in the centre of a cherry tree circle at Gedling Country Park as a quiet place for our residents to visit and reflect on life's traumas and on the people that we've lost, some of the most horrific atrocities and tragedies around the world, but also to the lives lost here in our borough. It seems inappropriate that we don't have a specific Holocaust memorial here in the borough, and we're going to put that right as a result of this budget. For our children's health and well-being, we aim to improve 2 further play areas in Colwick Rectory and also in St Mary's, for which I am incredibly grateful. It falls in my own ward, and will continue to invest in play parks in the coming years. And we know how devastating the impact of flooding can be. We've heard that particularly from our colleagues who represent rural communities. And with our partners, we will deliver further flood alleviation schemes. For greater public safety, we will install 3 further CCTV cameras in vulnerable areas, which Councillor Ellis is overseeing, and we've listened to the points made by colleagues cross-party about that, and I hope that they will be pleased about the reflections that are made in the budget. And we will also have a major focus on climate change, and we will continue to deliver against our carbon management action plan, and I know our new climate change officer is also already getting to grips with these issues. Mr Mayor, the work doesn't stop there. We will also complete the important schemes that are already underway, such as the King George V Recreation Ground, where we will install a new changing places public toilet facility and refurbish the old pavilion. We're replacing the the old Lamley Lane changing rooms. We're constructing a Sand Martin bank with new bird hides. This budget, Mr Mayor, focuses, I think, on the issues that matter most to our residents and businesses. It's a budget full of ambition, I think, on behalf of the entire council. And once again, I think this council has met our budget efficiency targets which we set, and we remain defiant in the face of the financial challenge that we face as a council. We're equal to the challenge, I think, Mr Mayor, because we have plans to invest in new digital technology to release efficiencies. We will further review our spending and income levels. We will improve the usage of our assets and facilities and seek new partners to share with. And we will procure goods and services better. This is a delicate situation balancing a number of key factors, Mr Mayor. The need to make the savings required, the need to treat people fairly, the need to continue to provide the services that our residents require. I know, and let me finish by saying this, Mr Mayor, this will not be easy. But as we have shown in previous years, we can do this together as a council, and we can do things correctly. Mr Mayor, I commend the Gedling plan, and I commend this budget to the council, and I look forward to a healthy and constructive debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Councillor Hollingsworth, the second.
Second, Mr Mayor, reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Elwood, I understand you've got an amendment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm presuming everybody's had sight of the amendments on their desks. This amendment is clearly for a fairly small sum of money, but we believe that it is a useful change to the budget which will help those residents in Gedling who are unable, through no fault of their own, to transport bulky waste to the household waste recycling centres. Under the Equality Act, the definition for disability is, quote, a substantial and long-term effect in the ability to do normal activities. So in that regard, we think it's not unreasonable that these residents with a disability should be helped in this way. This amendment complements the existing free bulky waste collection scheme that the borough already has for the over 65s, and it puts residents with a disability on the same footing as the over 65s. The figure of £10,000 is a best guess estimate of the net cost to the council by introducing this scheme. It's a combination of lost income from the bulky waste revenue budget and also the possible increased staff costs that might be associated with collecting waste from residents with disabilities. It's acknowledged that the actual figure could be a little bit higher or it could be a little bit lower in reality, but as with everything, it's a reasonable estimate of the extra costs that could be entailed. The funding of this increased expenditure is to be provided by a reduction in the members' pots by £250 per member. Clearly, we regret the fact that the councillor's pot has been reduced by this figure. We note that the councillor's pot for the forthcoming financial year is to be reduced as a one-off to £1,500 per member in the budget. It would be hoped, if this amendment was passed, that perhaps in future financial years, another source of funding could be perhaps found from other sources within the budget for the required £10,000. Overall, we're talking about finding a figure of £10,000 from the council's net budget of £12 million. And so I would urge all members to vote for this amendment. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Towsey Hinton to second.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have nothing further to add to my colleague's proposal, but I would like to second this amendment. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to propose a short adjournment so that members can consider this amendment. 10 minutes, yeah, to allow everyone.
Yeah, I know. Is that seconded? 10-minute adjournment. Councillor Scroggy. All those in favour of a 10-minute adjournment? Any against? Thank you. We will adjourn for 10 minutes. Right, reopen the meeting. We've gone past 10 minutes.
Oh, they're not coming.
The amendment has been moved and seconded. Would anybody like to talk on the amendment? Councillor Payne.
Thank you very much to Councillor Elwood and the Liberal Democrat group for putting forward a well-spirited and I think important amendment. We have taken the decision that we're not going to formally accept the amendment, but in doing so, I do want to give a commitment on the record to Councillor Elwood and the Liberal Democrat group and the wider council that I think the central principle and point that has been made in the amendment is constructive, is sensible and is well worth some further work. So although we're not going to formally approve of the amendment tonight, partly because, as Councillor Elwood said himself in quotation marks, this is a best guess estimate, and I accept that it's difficult to pin down figures on this. I just want to give a commitment to Councillor Elwood and to the Liberal Democrat group and to the broader council that we will, whatever the vote is tonight, ask for a proper report on this to come to Cabinet through the Chief Executive and SLT with proper proposals around this, including some much clearer modelling about costs so that it can be properly deliberated. I would extend an invitation on behalf of the Leader of the Council to Councillor Elwood to come and speak at that Cabinet meeting. And of course, everybody's heard here on the public record that, you know, it's a point that you've put across alongside your group, Councillor Elwood, and you can then obviously make of that what you will. And if it stacks up financially when it comes to Cabinet, you've got my assurance that we'll find a way to try and make it work in year or as soon as practically possible. I don't think I can say any more than that, but I hope that goes some way to at least taking the point seriously that's been made, which I think is a point well made by the Liberal Democrat group. But unfortunately, we can't support the amendment tonight on a kind of best guess estimate, but the point that is made is a good one.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. I was remiss in actually allowing you to speak because you're supposed to close on the amendment.
My fault.
Yes, and the Chief Executive has apologised, so it's not just me. Councillor Elwood, would you like to withdraw your amendment or do you wish it to go to a vote?
Discussion first.
I think we'll continue with the vote on the amendment for clarity.
Okay.
For clarity more than anything, I think. Yes, I would like the amendment to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Adams, did you wish to say something on this? Councillor Smith. Councillor Smith, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Similar grounds as what Councillor Payne has just mentioned. We support the overall aim that you're trying to achieve here, Councillor Elwood. However, the £10,000, as you've said in your own words, is a best guess, so we won't be able to support it on those grounds. But also, we would be more inclined to support the overall aim of this if it was opened up to the eligibility of every household. But again, that would cost far more than £10,000. We're also slightly cautious of reducing the members' pot even further. The budget proposed by the administration today already reduces that. You're proposing to reduce it by £250 per year. £250 may not seem a lot, but the impact it would have on the amount of people who are actually eligible, 18 to 64 with disabilities, is quite small compared to the impact that £250 could have to a community group such as the one in Trent Valley that is a befriending community group and does tea and coffee. We pay for their insurance, Councillor Adams and I, and that impacts a far greater number of people. So on those grounds, we will not be supporting the amendment proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Could I ask members to refer to it as the Councillors' Community Fund? Councillor's pot sounds... well, it's just me. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on the amendment? Councillor Elwood, would you like to close, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Payne for his constructive comments on my amendment. That is greatly appreciated, and yes, we look forward to contributing to a report to Cabinet on this issue. Yes, I acknowledge that the figures are uncertain. I did notice that on the borough's website, the reference was made to 11,000 eligible residents for the over 65s, and on the Nottinghamshire Insight documentation, it refers to a total figure in Nottinghamshire of people with disabilities between 18 to 65 of 54,000. So clearly that's a big number of people. So if you sort of estimated that the Gedling figure would be similar percentage to the Gedling population, you'd be talking about 7,700 disabled people. So it is acknowledged it is a significant number of people, but it's certainly something that we think should be looked into. And with regard to the members' initiative budget, as you yourself, Mr. Mayor, properly call it, I'm slightly surprised that Councillor Smith is concerned about that, in that my recollection is that in previous amendments that the Conservative group put forward to the Council, the members' initiative budget was reduced for their proposed amendments. So to my mind, it's not a sacrosanct figure, but as I say, I would agree. I would prefer it to be found elsewhere, and maybe working with officers and the administration in this cabinet process. Then we could find monies elsewhere that would protect the members' initiative budget. But thank you for that, and we look forward to the vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elwood. Normally I'd ask Councillor Payne to close, but as he's already spoken, I can't ask him. In line with the other motions that we've had, this needs to be a recorded vote. Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and my apologies, Councillor Payne, for that bad advice. So again, for this vote, when I call your name, please state either for, against or abstain. So Councillor Adams.
Against.
Councillor Peter Barnes. Councillor Sandra Barnes.
Against.
Councillor Barnfather.
Against.
Councillor Bosworth. Councillor Boyle.
Regretfully against.
Councillor Brooks.
Against.
Councillor Clooney.
Against.
Councillor Collis.
Against.
Councillor Creamer.
Against.
Councillor Duncan. Councillor Elliott.
Against.
Councillor David Ellis. Councillor Rachel Ellis.
Against.
Councillor Roxanne Ellis. Councillor Fox. Councillor Gibbons.
Against.
Councillor Greensmith.
Against.
Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Hope. Councillor Keneally.
Against.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Lawrence.
Against.
Councillor Ron McCrossan. Councillor Viv McCrossan. Councillor Miller. Councillor Murray.
Against.
Councillor Nyuk. Councillor Paling.
Against.
Councillor Parr. Councillor Payne.
Against.
Councillor Scroggy.
Against.
Councillor Martin Smith.
Against.
Councillor Sam Smith.
Against.
Councillor Towsey Hinton.
For.
Councillor Truscott. Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Wilkinson.
Against.
It's carried, Mr Mayor.
No, it isn't.
Oh, it's carried. Sorry, it's lost. Oh, I'm getting it wrong. Yes, lost. Sorry, lost.
The amendment is lost. We'll move back onto the original motion. Is there any debate on the original budget motion? Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And, oh, hello. Sorry, we're having a technical moment. Yes, thank you. And may I also wish Councillor John Clark a speedy recovery. It's never good to hear of people being unwell, and I truly hope he returns very soon. We've just. I would love to be able to carry on these sort of discussions in the way that they always begin, and I'd like to think I can do that this time. And what I want to talk about first of all is the fact that we are increasing this council tax by the highest percentage before a referendum is required. In a council that has the 26th highest council tax bandee rate out of 303 councils. And a question I ask about this is, if we are increasing that council tax again, what benefit are the residents of Gedling getting from that council increase? Are they getting anything new? Are they getting any of their services upgraded? Is there any improvement? Is there anything new? You know, what sort of things are going to really take them forward and take this community forward? And I'll be honest, I do find it a little unambitious in its target, but I do love the ambition around the Gedling plan, and I accept that, you know, there is a plan in place which is positive, and I like to see plans going forward for an area, and it's nice to see that. The concern I have with this plan is that the money has disappeared, and we don't have the ability to fulfil some of that plan. Now, Councillor Payne has pointed out some changes in the way that funding is happening, and there's no question that the fair funding formula will help with that longer term funding. But I do reject the idea that you can't plan a budget annually. You know, I work and have worked in business for my own for the past over 12 years now, and previously worked with many businesses before that. And there is short-term forecasting that does give you that ability to actually forecast for an annual budget. It's not the ideal, and I appreciate that it always helps to have a longer budget, but it can be done and operates very well in many businesses. What doesn't operate very well in many businesses is when a business comes up with a new idea and that business doesn't substantiate that idea, doesn't forecast that idea properly, and makes targets that are, let's say, a long way off from the reality that a business can make in its short term. And I think it would be completely unfair of me on the people of Gedling to not raise these points. In fact, let's not even feature my own words. Let's feature the words of the Taxpayers Alliance, who wrote in a recent report. I'm sorry? Pardon? Well, I don't think it really matters. The facts are in your own reports, Paul, so it makes no odds what they say.
Will you continue, Councillor Adams?
Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson, don't.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So, just moving on to the points of question. So, the Pet Cremation Service believed it will contribute £88,000 and achieve a 16% market share in the first year, citing a fully developed business case. In reality, it didn't exist. Furthermore, no calculations or methodology were submitted on the numbers of cremations expected to be undertaken annually, and to date losses have totalled £86,000, with deficits of £51,000 in 2019-2020 and £35,000 in 2020-2021. The crematorium expected income of some £173,000 in 2019-20, but the actual income was 10 times lower at just £17,000. So no wonder in the audit it was described as not providing sufficient detailed information to allow an accurate understanding of the potential risks involved. And this is where in a business that a business person would own, they're able to do this, even though I would never advise they do. They are actually able to do that because it's their money. And they can do as they see fit with their own money. However, we're not in that situation here. And this gamble, which it clearly is because of the lack of planning, has created a significant loss for this council. And if it was just on one possibility, one situation, maybe we could say, well, look, you know, we've learnt our lesson and we won't do it again. However, the tree cutting service, which combined profits after 2 years were estimated at 80,000, but actually created a total deficit of some 74,000, which is now forecast. Once again, predictions were way off the mark. And of course, although there is an acceptance that the pandemic will play a part in these things, and there's still time to turn that ship around, but as I understand it, we have no staff, and the reality of that happening is quite unlikely. And so that's a shame. That's a shame that that's happened. And unfortunately, I believe with the right planning, we could have avoided these mistakes, and therefore potentially could have avoided a council tax increase to cover those errors. Now, I was really glad to see that we've actually achieved some new homes bonus this year. And in fact, we've seen an income of over £1 million coming from central government from one thing or another, extra to the additional budget. So I was really, really happy to see that. And long may it continue. And hopefully we will see similar returns next year. I think what's clear in all of these things, and there's slightly more to come, but what's clear is that the instructions that are getting from the administration are neither researched or forecasted properly. And that's really disappointing. And it leads to a drop in services. For example, maybe we could have relocated some additional resource to the road sweeping teams when we were struggling for staff, if we'd have invested that money in staff instead of investing it in tree teams or, in fact, in a pet cremation service, which would have resolved issues of local street flooding caused by the blocking of the top water drainage surface, which is our responsibility. And in fact, I've raised an issue very recently to do with the A612. Supposedly, we're on a rotation to get these streets cleaned, but the A612 hasn't been cleaned for, I would go as far to say, a year. And the run from the Burton Joyce sign to probably the Toby Carvery has a build-up of detritus on the road that is actually creating growth of plants in it. So, it's not happening, and that needs to happen because that's important. It's important to residents, and we need to make sure that that is carried forward. I'd also like to see, as we move on, that our forecasting for council tax is not based on whether there's an election year or not. In 2019, council tax was frozen. Funnily enough, that was an election year. And in the last year, it was not, and this year, it will not be. So I do wonder if we're going to see in the next election year, in 2023, another freeze. And my major concern with this, and I really hope we don't see a freeze in that year, because we shouldn't be hoodwinking people into believe that we have a financially apt administration. And I would like to see, as we move forward, that as far as council tax is concerned, let's hope that's based on the actual need and not based on an election year. Now, we've had a claim in here as well that Nottinghamshire is the poorest, that Gedling is the poorest borough. We know that now not to be the case. And I do thank the Deputy Leader for pointing out that it's not the lowest. And like I said again, with the 26th highest council tax in the country, it really shouldn't be the lowest. We should be really performing and outperforming, which again makes you look at why that is and how we can be taking that level of income, but still ending up having to increase council tax every year. Now, the key thing for me as we move on from this is that we struggle to back a budget that is in the position it's in because of a lack of care. Now, if we were in this place because we hadn't lost all this money to pet projects, to ideas about commercial operations with the ability to generate income, and these things have been actually researched properly with proper business plans, then it would be easier to back such a budget. But we really cannot do that. But the problem is still there. We still have to have a budget for this council. Things still have to be allocated funding to pay for these things at the council. So it's very difficult to vote against a budget in that situation, because you have to accept that money has to be paid to certain items within that council and for that council to run. And I just want to touch on a couple of other things. I think it's great that the new AMP unit has been created in Arnold. And I look forward to its success and look forward to reading and seeing the business plan of that. And let's hope that when we sit here and review that in the coming future, that we actually have a traceable plan that actually has realistic targets and actually delivers on those targets. Because it's not fair on the people of Gedling to spend their money without taking that care in a time when, as the Deputy Leader rightly pointed out during the full council meeting at County Hall the other day, that actually the mention of the cost of living crisis was only mentioned twice in the county budget. I'm afraid it's not even mentioned once in this one. It says cost of living, but it doesn't mention the word crisis, and it only mentions it actually once in the entire budget. So again, this isn't a budget for me that's driven to help the people that are struggling the most in Gedling. I would like to see more of that. I would like to see a lot less waste than we're dealing with here. I'd like us to be successful in our opportunities with investment, whether that be through the Levelling Up funds, the Towns Fund. And with that sort of investment, maybe then we could transform even further and help the people of Gedling get the actual borough that they fully deserve, not that's driven by some decisions that, let's say, in any other commercial operation would not have been taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll take just a few points from what the remarks that have been made by Councillor Adams just now. But before I do...
Sorry, Councillor Boyle, could you speak directly in?
I beg your pardon,
that some
can you not
people
hear?
are having problems with hearing.
Yeah. Okay, apologies. I would like to start, before I deal with some of the points of Councillor Adams, with also expressing my wish that the Leader of the Council, John Clark, who works very hard on our behalf, recovers quickly. And I'm sad not to see him here tonight. Now, of the points that Councillor Adams is making, and I won't address them all, it seems to me that this budget and how it's been put together and what's been done, again, as has been done in previous years, with the fact that the cut in funding is about 65 pence in the pound, if you look at it from 2010, it's pulling rabbits out of a hat year after year. And we've done a lot of rabbits out of a hat, but there are only so many rabbits that you can do. The council tax increase, which is on the average of £5 for a bound E, was budgeted for or assumed, not by this administration, Councillor Adams, Mr. Mayor, it was assumed by the Chancellor of the Exchequer. So if there was a lack of ambition about the council tax increase which is now proposed, that lack of ambition for local communities was a lack of ambition from central government and Rishi Sunak. So we need to be clear where this is coming from. Councillor Adams also mentions the cost of living crisis. We address that cost of living crisis by our excellent council tax reduction scheme, which I'm very glad that Councillor Adams has supported in the past. But the point of a cost of living crisis also means that when you look at it, there is less room for manoeuvre for hard-pressed families and for hard-pressed residents from this council because there's a cost of living crisis affecting the whole community. So you have to support people more. So the cost of living crisis must be owned by the Conservative Party, who have presided over cuts since they took office in 2010 and have done very little about it. They should cancel the increase in national insurance that's coming. They should renationalise the energy companies and make sure that these hard-pressed budgets on people are not there. So if they want to have a debate about the cost of living prices, I will do it any time, any day of the week with them. In terms of the council tax as well, he talks about our tax take being the 26th highest or whatever he said. Well, look, look at the range of bands of housing. It's already been addressed. We have mainly bands A and B in Gedling. So, of course, the ability to recoup money through that without the central government support is somewhat limited. So I think some of the complaints that are coming are rather misplaced and perhaps should be withdrawn. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Is there anybody else who wants to take part in the debate? Councillor Martin Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I note that in relation to the Gedling plan, one of the two new proposed actions is to increase the prosperity and connectedness of rural communities. This is on page 182. Whilst I applaud this aim, can I ask the Deputy Leader, in the absence of Councillor Clark, to give a few more details about how this will be achieved and how the success or otherwise will be measured? Councillor Payne, you may wish to come back to me on this one rather than speak tonight. Those ward councillors on this side of the chamber who represent rural communities would be delighted to take part in any further discussions and planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin Smith. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to join with other comments and wish the leader well. As Councillor Payne has said, he's worked very hard on this budget, but I think the Deputy Leader is also being a bit modest because I know that he's had considerable input as well. Just to talk about the new homes bonus, which Councillor Payne mentioned, I don't think we got £1 million. I wish we had have got £1 million. Councillor Adams, it was actually £427,000, 670. But we look forward to the government actually settling the issue of new homes bonus, because when they introduced it in 2011, they introduced it as a final scheme design that was intended to be predictable, permanent, and an enduring feature of local government. And I'm really rather pleased that Councillor Adams isn't in charge of this council, because he seems to want to lurch from year to year and trying to forward plan for our residents on a yearly basis. That's not how we work, and you will see that in the plans for going forward, there is a sum of money for economic regeneration master planning for our town centres and shopping areas, because we know our businesses are the backbone of Gedling. We support them, they know we support them, and we will be looking to see what other improvements we can make for when we are re-elected as an administration in 2023. The new homes bonus, I have to pay credit to our amazing empty homes officer, something that the Conservative group opposed for some time, although they did support it latterly. The new homes bonus...
Excuse me, Councillor. Would you keep quiet over there, please? I can hear you. Councillor Hollingsworth and other councillors deserve to be heard in silence from the rest of you.
The new homes bonus has contributed considerably to achieving a balanced budget, and I am proud that we are able to have a balanced budget, not only for next year, but going forward. I am proud of what this administration has received. Pledges made, pledges kept. Arnold Market, phase 1 of Carlton Square, planning going forward to master plan for further improvements. Very proud that we have introduced through Councillor Wheeler's hard work, concessionary swimming for our veterans and young people, continued and improved Bonington Theatre, which would have closed under a Conservative administration, improved play areas, improved car parking, delivered the country park. So many things, so many achievements, thanks to this administration, supported by our incredible staff. And Councillor Elwood, if you can find that little bit of extra money from somewhere, you said, I think, can you let Alison Ball know, because she'll be really grateful to receive it. I support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Does anyone else want to take part in the debate? If not, Councillor Payne to close. Oh, Councillor Collis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one small point. An accusation has been made about we're in the top 30-odd council taxes in the country. Thank you. In actual fact, whilst that may be true, we're the third lowest within Nottinghamshire.
Thank you, Councillor Collis. Anybody else? No, Councillor Payne. Councillor Wilkinson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just following on from what Councillor Collis has just said, I'd just like to point out to Councillor Adams that of the council tax that's paid in Gedling, just 8.32% on current figures is levied by this council, this authority, and nearly 76% is actually levied by the county council. So I think we know where the responsibility for the council tax level lies.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. This is your last chance. Councillor Payne to close, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to colleagues for a healthy and constructive debate, and thank you to Councillor Hollingsworth for so eloquently setting out what a proud record this administration and the group that sits behind me has, which I'm immensely proud of and incredibly grateful for. And also let me restate my thanks to the staff, because we couldn't achieve anything as a council without the absolutely outstanding staff that we've got at this council. It would be remiss of me not to just address a few of the remarks made by the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Adams, because in a year's time he's going to be auditioning to sit in the seat of the gentleman who sits to my right, who deserves our tremendous thanks and accolades. He will be auditioning in the ensuing election to be the leader of this council and to be the steward of the finances of this council. And the points he makes tonight deserve scrutiny and deserve exposition before he stands before the residents and businesses of this borough, this great borough, in auditioning to be, hopefully he hopes, incoming leader of the council. Let me just start by the point you made, Councillor Adams, about a one-year funding settlement. And don't take it from me. Take it from the report that we debated at the County Council last week, that you were a co-author of, you're a lead member of the administration of, and that you voted for. The budget report on the 24th of February that was heard in the County Council that your administration put forward said this: the council faces, and I quote, an extremely challenging and uncertain financial environment. It went on to say, Mr. Mayor, this uncertainty has been exacerbated by a further 1 year only 2022-23 funding settlement. If you didn't think it was a problem then, Mr. Adams, what makes you change your mind tonight while you're here? I can tell you what makes you change your mind: political grandstanding, strolling around in the grass to try and find an issue to criticise this council for, if it was good enough for your leader and your 151 officer to criticise the uncertainty of a 1-year settlement, at least have the good grace when you come here tonight to recognise the immense pressure that that's putting on our staff in terms of the financial planning from year to year. Second point, Councillor Wilkinson has already addressed how utterly disingenuous and in the gutter almost it is of you to parade round saying that Gedling Borough Council has the highest council tax rate out of all authorities in England and that we are 26th. The reason it's disingenuous, the reason that it's in the gutter, is because what, of course, you don't go on to explain to the hard-working taxpayers who pay their council tax through us as a billing authority is that only 8% of council tax comes to Gedling Borough Council. A whopping 75% goes to the county council that you're in charge of and have been for the last 5 years. A meagre 4% goes to the fire service, who do an outstanding job, and 11% goes to the police. And when you say that there's an extra burden in terms of council tax on hard-working families, you don't point out tonight that your own Conservative-run Ravenshead Parish Council, which makes up an element of the bill, has proposed this year and voted for, including members who are in your own ranks, a 4.8% council tax rise. So if we're going to have a debate about council tax, Councillor Adams, let's have one with all of the facts on the table, not just mistruths. And let me just say this directly to the question that you posed to me about what are residents in this borough getting for the small increase, the 7 pence a week increase in council tax that we're asking for this year. They're getting a brand new Arnold Market. They're getting investment in Gedling Country Park. They're getting additional CCTV cameras, including in your own ward. They're getting additional investment in street cleaning. They're getting further investment in our leisure centres. They're getting a council tax reduction scheme that protects 4,700 families in our borough, including in your own ward, protected from a council tax increase, not only levied by this council, but by the county council, the police service and the fire service. They're getting an administration that will continue working with the Police and Crime Commissioner to tackle the issues we've got around burglary in this borough. They're getting a whole range of things from this council and from this administration. And I can only conclude from the point you made tonight, Councillor Adams, is that you haven't even bothered to do the decency of reading this fantastic Gedling plan and this excellent budget which sets out exactly what is on the line when it comes to the vote in 5 minutes' time. And just on Arnold Market, how dare you sit there tonight and say that there's a burden on the taxpayer? The taxpayer in Gedling wouldn't have to foot the bill if your government got off its backside and started giving us some money from the Levelling Up Fund instead of shoveling it to marginal constituencies that are controlled by your party nationally. And it's about time that our MPs started backing us on it as well. And let me just finish by saying this, Councillor Adams. Bring back Councillor Barnfather as leader of the group. Because I tell you this, for all the disagreements I had with Councillor Barnfather, and believe me, they were many, and sometimes raucous in this chamber, at least he had the decency in standing up and criticising this administration to literally put his money where his mouth was in setting out his plans. To coin a phrase, Councillor Adams, you have said you are a man who likes a plan. Where is your plan tonight? There is no budget amendment, which we used to see from Councillor Barnfather. You complain about some A road not being cleaned in your own ward. If you wanted more money being invested in street cleaning, present an amendment like Councillor Elwood had the decency do tonight. You're without ideas, you're without a plan for this borough, and you don't deserve letting anywhere near the excellent finances of this council, and the voters will say so in 12 short months' time. I urge everybody to get behind this absolutely outstanding budget that couldn't have happened without the fantastic work of our 151 officer and our staff here at the council.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. In line with previous resolutions, this has to be a recorded vote. Mr. Hill.
Thank you once again, Mr. Mayor. So for this vote, when I call your name, please state either for, against or abstain. Councillor Adams.
Abstain.
Councillor Peter Barnes. Councillor Sandra Barnes. Councillor Barnfather.
Abstain.
Councillor Bosworth. Councillor Boyle.
4.
Councillor Brooks.
4.
Councillor Clooney.
4.
Councillor Collis.
4.
Councillor Creamer.
Extremely positive 4.
Councillor Duncan. Councillor Elliott. Councillor David.
Cut this disrespect out to people that are voting. It's a bit out of order. Let's just deal with it.
Councillor Adams, we've had to put up with some of your disrespect, so it's equal, I suppose, but I would ask people to try and get back to the consensus that we had at the beginning of the meeting.
I abstained. Anyway, if you didn't get that, thank you.
Abstain from Councillor Elliott, thank you. Councillor David Ellis.
4.
Councillor Rachel Ellis.
4.
Councillor Roxanne Ellis.
4.
Councillor Elwood. Councillor Feeney. Councillor Fox. Councillor Gibbons.
4.
Councillor Greensmith.
Abstain.
Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Hope. Councillor Keneally.
4.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Lawrence.
4.
Councillor Ron McCrossan. Councillor Viv McCrossan. Councillor Miller. Councillor Murray.
Abstain.
Councillor Nayuk. Councillor Paling.
4.
Councillor Parr. Councillor Payne.
4.
Councillor Scroggy.
4.
Councillor Martin Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Sam Smith.
Abstain.
Councillor Towsey Hinton. 4. Councillor Truscott. 4. Councillor Wheeler. 4. Councillor Wilkinson.
4. The budget is carried. Thank you very much. We've still got something else on the agenda, which I will come to in a minute. Oh, it's the Constitution, isn't it? All right. Councillor Payne, you're moving an amended resolution. If you remember this, laid on the table at last meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor, and there will be consensus, I'm sure, cross-party on this. The amended recommendation, I think the report speaks for itself. We obviously couldn't debate it last night because it's a constitutional change. The amended recommendation that I'm moving, to be seconded by Councillor Hollingsworth, is that the Council, 1, approves the new version of the Constitution at Appendix 1, and 2, which is the amended part, delegates authority to the Head of Governance and Customer Services to make any typographical or formatting amendments to the Constitution, which I think is in good order and makes eminent sense. Just while I've got the floor, Mr Mayor, let me reiterate my thanks for the consensus we found earlier tonight on, I think, the most important order of the day, which is the tragic situation in Ukraine. Of course, the budget is important. Of course, there was going to be disagreement on the budget, but those issues pale in comparison in terms of the situation that the Ukrainians are facing. Once we have reached agreement and unanimous consent, hopefully, on the Constitution, with your permission, Mr Mayor, and with your guidance, I would invite all elected members to remain at the front of the chamber for a photo and show of solidarity that we can then share with the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Kingdom to return to where we started this meeting, which is in consensus and agreement about the most important issue that we face. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. I was going to say that, but no, I don't need to. Councillor Hollingsworth, would you like to second the
Seconded and
motion?
reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Is there any debate? Councillor Barnfather, and could I apologise the last time? I think I was a bit short with you over the minor amendments that you wanted to give to the Constitution.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't recall you ever being short with me, but thank you for the apology. It's a point of clarification as much as anything, Mr. Mayor. It's an issue I've raised on many occasions, both with senior planning officers, with certainly the previous chief executive, if not with this one, and the one before that, and with the chair of the planning committee. And that is the ability of ward members to be able to call in planning applications to be heard by the committee itself. I appreciate we have a planning delegation panel and there's the opportunity for ward members to appear before that panel, but they simply make a request. They have no absolute right to request that an application within their ward that may excite considerable public interest is heard by committee rather than being delegated to officers. It is a right that at the county council every divisional member has, that any item that is within their division, they have the ability to have an absolute right for that matter to be heard by committee rather than to be delegated by officers, even if it would come within that criteria. Not only do they have the right for it to be heard by committee, but they have an absolute right to be heard themselves in speaking on behalf of their residents on local issues which they may be far more informed of than perhaps officers or indeed members of that committee who come from other parts of the county, or in this case here, the district. I've read the proposed amendments to the Constitution and I'm a little confused because on page 301 at item 85F, it does talk about if any councillor, whether or not a member of the planning committee, acts as a speaker on behalf of a lobby group at committee, they must withdraw once they have spoken, etc., etc. We don't actually have any right, to the best of my knowledge, because that's what I've always been told, to appear at committee on behalf of a lobby group. So the fact that I'm being asked to withdraw is rather immaterial because I don't have a right to be there in the first place or to have a right of audience. So neither can I ask for a matter to be heard by committee rather than dealt with by delegation, but neither do I have the right to represent my residents as a ward member. So I'm asking for some clarification. It may be that I am misunderstanding because that item at point F does seem to indicate that we have had a change of heart and I do have a right of representation or audience at committee as a ward member, but I can't find anything in the document, and it may be my fault that I'm missing it somewhere. So a point of clarification, Mr. Mayor, as much as anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnfather. Can we come back to you, please, on that particular?
Well, the problem, Mr. Mayor, is that we're going to be voting on this Constitution in a moment, and it will determine how we vote on this Constitution if we don't have an answer to the question, if that makes sense.
Does anybody else want to say something whilst that is being researched?
Whether this is helpful or not, I don't know. You can take this as me summing up. Unless anybody else
you're
wants
going to close on it. I just want to make sure if anybody else wants to say anything. Councillor Barnfather has answered the question, asked a question. And would you like to?
I don't want to say anything else in summing up. I just want to say to Councillor Barnfather, I don't know if this assists or not, I wholeheartedly agree with you. The central point you make is self-evidently correct. And I think, Chris, and I don't think it's beyond the wit of the council here collectively and our officers, we can't resolve the issue here tonight. We need to resolve it. We need to find a way through the issue because I've faced the issue before. I'm not best placed to do this. I don't sit on the planning committee. They clearly will have a view. They are better placed than me. But we need to find an appropriate route through this issue and a resolution to this issue because I've had the same problem and other councillors will have had the same problem. So it can't be beyond the wit of man that we do that. My suggestion to do this, I had a very brief conversation with Emma earlier today about I think, some further issues that we've got to resolve in the Constitution, one of which actually has been brought to light tonight about what you do when you've got urgent business if you don't use the legislation nationally. And there are some other bits that I think Fran and Emma want to look at further. I would say we need to use that time, Chris, to collectively work as a council cross-party with officers to find an appropriate route, obviously also being cognisant of Councillor Truscott on Planning Committee, of which I know you remember, Chris, because you'll be closer to the issues than I am. But I would suggest that's a way forward, and that you've got our commitment, certainly from our side of the chamber, Chris, that we're happy to work with you on that, because I think the point you make is spot on.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. It has been closed now. So, in line with the other motions tonight, this has to be done by recorded vote. Mr. Hill, over to you again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to complete that, I think we will. We're okay in the conclusion recommendation there for minor amendments, so we'll pick that up if that's okay in that section. So you can vote on the recommendation tonight. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. So again, for this vote, when I call your name, please state either for, against, or abstain. Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Peter Barnes. Councillor Sandra Barnes. For. Councillor Barnfather.
For.
Councillor Bosworth. Councillor Boyle.
For.
Councillor Brooks.
4.
Councillor Clooney.
4.
Councillor Collis. 4. Councillor Creamer.
4.
Councillor Duncan. 4. Councillor Elliott.
4.
Councillor David Ellis. 4. Councillor Rachel Ellis.
4.
Councillor Roxanne Ellis.
4.
Councillor Elwood. 4. Councillor Feeney. 4. Councillor Fox. 4. Councillor Gibbons.
4.
Councillor Greensmith.
4.
Councillor Hollingsworth. 4. Councillor Hope. 4. Councillor Keneally.
4.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Lawrence.
4.
Councillor Ron McCrossan. 4. Councillor Viv McCrossan. 4. Councillor Miller.
4.
Councillor Murray.
4.
Councillor Nayuk. Councillor Paling.
4.
Councillor Parr. 4. Councillor Payne.
4.
Councillor Scroggy.
4.
Councillor Martin Smith.
4.
Councillor Sam Smith.
4.
Councillor Towsy Hinton.
4.
Councillor Truscott. 4. Councillor Wheeler. 4. And Councillor Wilkinson.
4.
Unanimous, Chair.
That's carried. Thank you very much. Before you have a safe journey home, remember Councillor Payne is asking for a photograph, and you'll be in the hands of Mr. McCleary. Yeah, if you...
So if I close the meeting, Mr. Mayor. So ladies and gentlemen, members of the council, please be upstanding for the worshipful, the Mayor of Gedling, and come down to the front for a photograph. Thank you.